Everybody, tonight we're going to be going over my topic, which is advising departmental planning, comprehensive scheduling for optimal student access. Quick little agenda for you. We're going to be going over the introduction, the statement of the problem, why the problem keeps occurring, what the literature says and what other schools have done about this issue, the theoretical framework that we're going to be basing our recommendations within, and then the recommendations themselves. So, educational planning is a process which an advisor and a student sit down and they plan out basically a roadmap towards their degree, okay? This has to be done with an advisor. And there was a law in California where our college is located called the Seymour Campbell Student Success Act that stated all students at California community colleges must have an educational plan. The college we're going to be looking at is Mid-Coast College. Currently, about 17,000 students go to Mid-Coast College. Actually, the fun thing about this law, the Seymour Campbell Student Success Act, is that it gave money to colleges to help students get this ed plan done. So Mid-Coast College itself gained 8 advisors. They went from 15 to 23 after 2012, which brought their ratios from 1,400 students to one advisor down to 900 students to one advisor. However, prior to 2012, there was about 50% of the students on campus had ed plans. Now, only about 60% of them do. There's about 3,500 new students every year. And the most recent cohort of students that has been at Mid-Coast College for 2 years, of that, only 40% of those students have educational plans. So the real problem here is a lack of institutional planning within the advising department. And a symptom of it is that students don't have ed plans as a result of this lack of planning. So this problem keeps happening because Mid-Coast College, like all community colleges, is open access. So therefore, the advisors see themselves as open access as well. What that means is they think they should be available to any student at any time for any reason, anytime reasonably, not in the middle of the night. And administration thinks this as well, and now the students have been conditioned to think this as well. So students will come in any time of the year asking any question. The advisor role at Mid-Coast College is very undefined. So what that means is there has to be a lot of different things. Registrar to help students sign up for classes, advisor to help them pick which classes to sign up for and plan out their career. And then also mental health counselors, which plays into the service health or service professional mentality. In California, every community college counselor has to have a master's degree in some sort of counseling. And that is actually a state law. In order to, it's a state rule that counselors have to have a counseling background. So all counselors or advisors are going to have some sort of training in holistic student development, whether that be from a marriage and family therapy perspective or a student-centered perspective. And this plays into their service professional mentality, and they want to approach each student holistically, which takes more time than just a prescriptive approach of, here, take these classes, call me next semester. Okay, when you're trying to get to know a student from a holistic perspective, you're going to need to build rapport with them, have multiple appointments with them in order to do so. So that's why this problem keeps occurring. So the literature says advising should be done from a service professional mentality, in the sense that holistically, you should meet the students where they're at and try to get to know them to help them plan out their career, their academic career, whatever, better. Okay. However, this takes a lot of time, like I said, and will create not enough time for all students, especially with that ratio. All right. What this can do is cause frustration for students that aren't able to see advisors because they're talking to the other students that got there first, because it's first come, first serve. So less than 30% of students nationwide see an advisor at all. Okay. Even though a ton of them say they know they should see an advisor. So there's a lot of reasons for that, mainly just availability of advisors is one of the big ones. Embarrassment is other ones too. Also, they can just get frustrated when going to see somebody, not knowing what you want to major in, and them saying, well, why don't you take these classes and I'll see you in 6 months, rather than asking and getting to know them. So other schools, what have they done? Obviously within California, this law went into effect, so schools had to try and do it. Some of them developed intrusive counseling models where they're trying to call students, email students, go to their classrooms, try to get to know them and get them in to make that ed plan. So being more focused rather than just letting students show up first come, first serve. Offering services at night, on the weekends, or even offering services online, which is probably going to increase with the way everyone found out technology actually works for almost everything in higher education now, almost everything. Then other schools have collaborated with paraprofessionals. Every advising department has staff and other people that work there that aren't just doing ed plans. So why not utilize them to help bring students in to those ed planning appointments, whether that be by calling them, going to their classrooms, adopting this methodology. Also, if a student doesn't show up to an appointment, that's 30 or 45 minutes that an advisor is sitting there doing this. Let's be realistic, they're not just doing that, but administration thinks they're just doing that. So having a student or an advisor actually call students when they're not showing up to appointments and try to work with them over the phone, or maybe give them a Zoom link and try to help them and show them your screen, things like that. Basically, the big thing is to move away from a first come, first serve model and try to reach out to students and bring them into the department to get those ed plans done, develop that rapport, things like that. So the theoretical framework we're going to be using is Cantor et al.'s Big Three Plan Change Model. The way this one works is it has looking at the macro evolutionary forces for change, which are looking at what other institutions have done, the micro evolutionary forces for change, which is understanding that just because other schools did these things in their change, you're still a unique institution, okay? Try to find things that work for you, put them together, make them work for you, or create your own. And then the political forces for change. So how is this change that you're making going to shift the power within this department or institution? So you need to understand that too within this model. So the macro evolutionary forces for Midcoast College would be looking at Northbrook College, which is another college in California, for example, or the the governmental lens, which is aiming for 100% completion of ed plans. So if we look at the data of Midcoast College, we see that in 2021, approximately 2,700 students completed their ed plans. When there was almost 3,300 ed plan appointments completed, so we had 555 duplicate. Some students came in and did multiple ed plans, which is a problem. But the thing is about this data, we talked earlier about 3,500 students each year. This data is for all students at the college, not just the new ones. So that's an issue. If we're looking at 40% of that, that's a much smaller number of new students having completed their ed plan in their first year, when it's so key to do it then. The microevolutionary forces, we want to review the roles of the paraprofessionals within the department itself, see what they're doing, and then also see what the advisors are doing. All those examples I gave you earlier, is it conducive to have advisors with all the responsibilities if the goal is to have them cranking out ed plans? Probably not. If they don't want as many ed plans, then let's re-examine the goal. So if we're examining the data from the macroevolutionary perspective, there were 9,800 appointments booked for advisors. So appointments can be multiple things, not just ed plans, as you'll see. But only 5,800 of those bookings were unique students. So we had a lot of duplicates there. And then if we look at how many students actually saw advisors, whether that be in a walk-in or an appointment, only 6,700, close to 6,800 out of 1,700. That's about a third. So looks like those numbers that national people gave us were about right. So this graph here kind of ties it home. Here's the total appointments we offer, or were booked, excuse me. Here's how many were ed plan. You see, that's about a third. And that's how many were unique students, so even less. This is my favorite graph. Here's how many appointments were offered, that 9,800 or so. This is all at Midcoast College. Here's how many drop-ins came in. So this is how many drop-in appointments or drop-in contacts there were. And, okay, you would expect the red and the blue to add up and just kind of go bigger, right? Double up, that's how many students were served. But no, you only had that's 6,700 students served. So you had that many duplicates with all these contacts. So that's an issue. We need to look at how we're actually scheduling students and how we're offering our services to students to try and increase that number of unique student contacts. here is the graph itself. If you see, we have them. You can pause this and look at it longer if you like. Number of appointments, unique appointments. This is it all laid out for you. And then if we're talking about the political forces from Cantor et al. Change model, whenever we make these changes, students are going to lose power, right? Because we have those students that were doing duplicates, they're not going to be able to do as many. But students are also going to gain power. The students that weren't able to attend the appointments now should be able to have that opportunity to do so. Then we're also going to talk about the shift of the responsibilities. Now, advisors may lose or gain power depending on what kind of responsibility you're taking away from them. And then the paraprofessionals will probably lose a little power, or they might gain it since they're scheduling for the advisors. If we're going with that model, they might gain power over the advisors in their schedule. Then advisors lose power within their schedule, but then advisors gain power over the paraprofessionals since now they're working in a more tightly coupled model as opposed to the loosely coupled model they were in before. So those dynamics are going to have to be looked at in a little more detail. This is just to get us started. And lastly, here are my sources if you'd like to check them out. Thank you, everybody, for paying attention this long, and have a great evening.